She left the house to grab milk and eggs. She said she'd be back in 20 minutes. That was 14 years ago. No note, no phone call, no sign of struggle, just gone. But when her son opened a forgotten box in the attic, everything unraveled. A different name, a different past, and a truth so unbelievable it rewrote everything they thought they knew. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he examined the security feed. The image wasn't high resolution, but it didn't need to be. Her face, thinner now, aged by time and burden, was unmistakably hers. Mom Ellie whispered the word cracking under the weight of years unsaid. On the screen, Catherine Dawson sat at a workstation aboard the freighter Eastern Horizon, her fingers moving over a keyboard, eyes downcast. Around her, a dozen other women worked silently. No conversation, no laughter, just muted obedience under fluorescent lights. Ethan stepped back from the screen, his throat tightening. 14 years, 14 birthdays, 14 empty chairs at Christmas. And here she was, alive, breathing, broken, but alive. The family was silent, the magnitude of the moment anchoring them. Detective Vans cleared his throat. We've confirmed the ship is heading south-southeast. The Coast Guard is moving to intercept it now. ETA is just under 2 hours. Dan, their father, turned his wheelchair slowly toward the screen. He stared at his wife, the woman who had kissed him goodbye one Saturday afternoon, and vanished. His eyes brimmed with tears that didn't fall. I thought, maybe she left because of me, he whispered. I was broken. Useless. No, Ethan said firmly. She didn't leave. She was taken. 2 hours later, the family stood at the Coast Guard base watching a live drone feed of the Eastern Horizon. Vessel secured, came the voice over the loudspeaker. Preparing to board. Ethan couldn't breathe. The screen flickered. A team of armed officers stormed the deck. They moved quickly, professionally, room by room, door by door, clearing the ship like a chessboard sweeping toward the rear quarters. And then, we have her an officer radioed in. One female, matches description, alive, disoriented, responding to name, Catherine. The reunion wasn't a movie scene. There were no running embraces, no swelling music. It was quiet. Ethan stood frozen as a woman in a gray sweatshirt and rubber sandals was escorted into the room. She looked small, weathered, not quite the mother he remembered, but somehow more real. Catherine looked up, her eyes locked on Ethan's. For a second, no one moved. Then she whispered, "My boy." Ethan broke. He ran to her, arms out, and they collapsed into each other. No words. Just breath. Just presence. The days that followed were blurry. Statements were taken. Medical exams were done. Therapists were assigned. Catherine explained in fragments. The money problems. The debt. The threats from Raymond Dawson's people. How she thought she was protecting them by disappearing. How she thought they'd be safer believing she was gone rather than being used against her. I never stopped thinking about you, she said one evening, seated beside Dan's hospital bed. Every night. Every single night. Dan just took her hand and didn't let go. Catherine didn't return home as a hero. She returned as a scar. One that hadn't fully healed for her or for the family she'd left behind. For the first few nights, she didn't sleep in a bed. She folded a blanket on the floor of her daughter's room and lay there, eyes wide open, watching shadows on the ceiling like they were monitors on the ship. She flinched at the sound of microwave beeps, jumped when someone closed a door too fast. Ellie tried her best. She brought Catherine tea the way she remembered her mom liking it, chamomile honey, no lemon. But Catherine didn't drink it. Not because she didn't want to, because she didn't remember. 14 years, Ellie, she said softly. I don't know who I am in this kitchen anymore. Ethan was quieter than usual. The boy who had pulled every thread to find her now struggled to look her in the eye. One night he found her sitting on the porch in Dan's hoodie, the one she'd given him the day before she disappeared. He sat beside her in silence. Eventually, Catherine spoke. I missed your first shave, your first heartbreak, your graduation. Ethan swallowed, his voice cracked. I missed you too, Mom. But I lived for this moment, even when I didn't think it would come. In the weeks that followed, media outlets stormed the story. Catherine refused every interview. She didn't want to be the woman who vanished. She wanted to be someone's mom again. The investigation into the Eastern Horizon led to dozens of arrests. Raymond Dawson was extradited and charged with organized trafficking, coercion, and more. But the headlines didn't interest Catherine. She had her own battles, with silence, with memory, with the guilt that crept into her bones like cold water in winter. I left, she'd whisper in therapy. Even if it wasn't my choice, I still left. Dan tried to bridge the gap, but his body had grown weaker while hers had been captive. One evening, she sat beside him in the dark, holding his hand. "You waited," she said. Dan turned to her, tears forming. "You came back. That's all that matters." Ellie brought out old photo albums. They laughed at hairstyles, cried over baby shoes. One page had a Polaroid of Catherine holding newborn Ethan. She touched the photo. "I want to earn my way back into this picture." Ellie smiled. "Mom, you never left it." Catherine started journaling. Not to write a book, not for justice, but to reclaim her name in ink. Page by page, she rewrote herself, not the woman lost at sea, but the one who came back to rebuild. She called it After the Horizon. The final photo from her journal showed a sunrise. No filters, no caption, just light after a long, quiet dark. A year passed. No milestones, no celebrations, just slow re-entry. Catherine took a job at the local library. It wasn't about money. She just needed silence that wasn't surveillance. The quiet hum of fluorescent lights. The soft thud of books being reshelved. Children whispering in corners. It reminded her that silence could be safe again. Every Tuesday, she volunteered at the women's shelter downtown. Not to tell her story, but to listen. There, in a circle of broken but unbowed women, she heard pieces of herself in other people's pain. One woman said, "It wasn't the captivity that changed me. It was the moment I realized I didn't belong to my fear anymore." Catherine wept with her, not out of sadness, out of recognition. Ethan enrolled in law school. He wanted to specialize in missing persons legislation. He said, "We can't undo what happened to Mom, but we can make sure fewer families wait 14 years for a photo and a headline." Catherine mailed him a letter before his first exam. Inside, an old shopping list in her handwriting, one he had clutched as a child, asking, why didn't she even finish shopping? On the back, she'd written, "I'm still buying time, but now it's for you." Dan's health continued to decline, but his will to see each morning grew stronger. Sometimes Catherine read to him, stories they used to love. Other times, she just sat beside him, quiet, present. One evening, he looked at her and said, "You didn't leave me." Life paused. And now we're unpausing it. Together. Ellie began writing songs again. She'd stopped for years, but now, words returned to her like birds to spring. One night she played a new song at a community event. The chorus was simple. "You were gone, but you were always home, in the shape of hope and the sound of someday." Catherine sat in the front row, tears rolling freely as her daughter gave her voice back. The story no longer belonged to newspapers. It belonged to the kitchen table, to whispered goodnights, to laughter at burned pancakes, to the quiet way Catherine now tucked her granddaughter's hair behind her ear before bed. She wasn't trying to make up for the 14 years. She was making something new with the ones she had left. Every anniversary of her return, they didn't light candles. They made a single dish, the one she never got to finish cooking the day she disappeared. Tomato soup with basil and grilled cheese. They'd sit at the table, dip the bread slowly, and raise a spoon to the woman who came home. Not whole, not healed, but home. Catherine often said the world had grown louder while she was gone. Phones were smarter. People walked faster. Even the silence had changed. She didn't know how to order food from an app. Didn't understand memes. Didn't get the slang. But none of that frightened her. What did? Opening the door of her own fridge without asking. The house didn't feel like hers anymore. The floors creaked in different places. There were photos on the wall she wasn't in. Jokes she didn't understand. Inside jokes with no punchline for her. And still every morning she'd walk the hallway barefoot, light a candle in the kitchen, and whisper, "Devo, still here." Like she was still counting her days at sea, but in reverse. Dan encouraged her to keep journaling. So she did. Some entries were only a sentence. "I remembered how to fold laundry without checking for bugs. I didn't flinch when the microwave beeped. I hugged Ethan and didn't freeze." Other entries stretched pages. Memories resurfaced. Smells. Songs. The sound of metal doors closing behind her. The strange kindness of a fellow worker who passed her a candy bar and whispered, "Don't let them take your name." She never forgot that, and she never let anyone take her name again. Catherine Dawson, but also Mom. And now to one tiny toddler in the family nana. Her granddaughter Lily became her greatest teacher. Lily didn't know her as the missing woman. She only knew her as the lady with the soft sweaters and mint candies. With Lily, Catherine wasn't broken. She was just present. One day Lily fell and scraped her knee. She cried not from pain, but fear. Catherine scooped her up and held her close. "It's okay, I'm right here, you're safe." And in that moment, she realized she was speaking to herself too. They planted a tree together that spring, a small dogwood, delicate and young. Lily called it the comeback tree. And every time it bloomed, Catherine smiled and whispered, "So did I." By the second year, Catherine started hosting a small circle of women once a month. Some were survivors. Some were mothers of the missing. Some were simply women who wanted to talk about being invisible. They met in the library basement. No agenda, no rules, just space. And Catherine gently guiding, sometimes saying nothing at all. Because sometimes healing doesn't sound like wisdom. It sounds like, "Me too." Catherine began walking every morning at sunrise. Not fast, not for exercise. Just walking. Each morning she chose a different direction from her home, like retracing all the routes she never got to take. She paused often, took photos of things most people didn't notice: dew on a mailbox, a forgotten boot chalk drawings on sidewalk corners. She posted them anonymously on a blog called Things I See Since Coming Back. Each image came with no caption, and yet each one said, "I'm still here." Her granddaughter Lily started joining her walks. At first she complained early mornings weren't fun, but soon she began asking questions. "Did you have trees like this where you were? Did you ever see the moon underwater? Did you think about me before I was born?" To that last one, Catherine answered without hesitation, "Every day." Ellie published a short documentary at her university titled The Woman Who Didn't Vanish. It didn't focus on the disappearance. It focused on the return, on how people rebuild, on the nuance of coming back to a world that didn't wait and choosing to live in it anyway. Catherine never watched the full version. She said, "It's enough to know the ending is still happening." Every year on the anniversary of the day she disappeared, the family did not mourn. They gathered in the backyard, cooked the meal she had planned to make the night she vanished, baked ziti with garlic bread and peach cobbler. They told stories. Some were about the past. Some were made up entirely by Lily, who now declared herself the family's memory manager. Catherine always laughed hardest at those. And when someone asked if she wanted to speak, she'd say, "I did enough of that in my silence. Now I just want to listen." In her bedroom above the desk hung a small hand-painted sign Lily had made in art class. In shaky, glitter-glued letters it read, "Nana came back and stayed." Catherine never took it down. It wasn't decoration. It was truth, a truth that no longer hurt to look at. One morning, 3 years after her return, Catherine received a package. No return address. Inside was a worn-out leather notebook. On the first page, a scribbled note, "For the one who lived. Not all of us did, tell it right." She never found out who sent it. But she added her own note to the last page before placing it in her closet. "I can't tell it all, but I'll keep living loud enough that it doesn't go forgotten." Catherine no longer counted years. Not since the anniversary when she forgot to mark the date and felt no guilt. It was Lily who reminded her later that night. "Nana, it's been 4 years since your big come-home day." And Catherine just smiled and said, "Then today was a good one." That was the first time she allowed herself to forget. And it felt like freedom. She began to keep a new kind of journal. Not about the past, not about trauma, just about now. One entry read, "The basil on the windowsill is growing faster than I thought. I think I'll name it Second Chance." Another, "Lily asked me what my favorite color was. I didn't know. I said soft morning blue. I think that's true." She gave talks sometimes. Small groups, local only. Never about what happened. Only about what matters after. "I didn't come back to be interviewed," she once said. "I came back to be a grandma who can braid hair again, to cry at school plays, to hold hands and not flinch, to learn how to take photos of clouds again and think, this one looks like a promise." People didn't clap. They hugged her. She wrote a letter to herself, addressed to the woman who vanished. She read it aloud only once on a park bench early in the morning with no one around. "You didn't disappear. You were hidden. But you didn't stop being you. They took your time, but not your tenderness. They tried to rename you with silence, but you came back singing lullabies again. And the girl who used to hum while folding laundry? She's still in there, just wiser now. Welcome home, Catherine." She folded the paper and placed it under the soil at the base of Lily's tree. Let the words root where pain once had. In the spring of her 5th year home, Catherine was asked to read the names of missing women at a candlelight vigil. She hesitated, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to say something more. When her turn came, she read the list. Slowly, clearly, tenderly. Then paused and added, "I was one of them, and I came back. So don't just light candles. Leave the door open. Leave the porch light on. And when they walk in, don't ask them who they used to be. Ask them who they want to become." The crowd stood in silence. Then a single woman in the back whispered, "Welcome home." And from every corner of the field, others repeated it, not in unison, but like wind through trees. Soft, unplanned, unstoppable. "Welcome home," Catherine cried that night, but not for what she'd lost. She cried for what she now had the strength to hold and to let go of. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the strength it takes to return, to forgive, to rebuild, let us know in the comments below. What part of Catherine's journey stayed with you the most? Like this video. If you believe no one is ever truly lost, subscribe to Tim's Stories for more true narratives that echo long after the video ends. Turn on notifications because some stories need to be heard to be healed.